topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to Chasing Purpose. I'm your host, Kathleen Connor. And if this is your first time here, I'm really glad you found your way in. And I hope you stay a while. If you've been here before, well, welcome back. We have a lot to cover today. And it's kind of a segue in from last week. Last week, we talked about the pause and what to do to not be triggered. In this episode, we're going to talk about what happens when you are triggered. What happens when you want to win at something, an argument, to convince somebody, to just prove that you're right, and more importantly, that the person you're proving that to is wrong. So a lot of times what happens is that our egos get in the way. Most of the time, it's your ego. It's the fear part of you. And that can destroy a lot of things, conversations, momentum, healthy relationships, healthy conversations. Ego is kind of yucky, and it feels that way a lot when we identify with it and we understand it and we can move away from it. It can bring a lot more peace and joy into our lives. So your constant need to prove to someone that you're right and that they're wrong causes a lot of conflict, a lot more conflict than that one conversation. It can build into resentment. It can build into dislike. It can build into a lot of things and a lot of negative emotions. I'm going to share with you a story. I had a college roommate years and years ago, and I've talked about her in the past, and I loved her, and I loved her family, and I loved spending time with them. They had 8 kids and a loud family. And what I loved about going to their house was just the constant white noise, the constant movement of people and emotions and dogs and everybody and everything coming in. You could hear the screen door. And as I'm telling the story, I have fond memories of the screen door just slamming and people going in and out, doing lots of things, lots of activities. But part of her family, and I would say close to 100% of my time with them. What I didn't love, which was exhausting, was the part that they were so competitive, that sometimes that competitiveness created stances and convincing arguments that just created an unhealthy vibe. And they would take fun situations, such as a simple game of Trivia Pursuit that we often played, and always it seemed like it played at the end of the night. And they would want to win so viciously and prove that the other person would not only be wrong in their answers, but prove how wrong they were. And at times I would pull away when the competition got so fierce because it was just, I don't know, it just seemed unhealthy to me. It was loud, and it never got violent or any abusive or any of that type of stuff. And I think that that's just how they were raised, and that's where they found fun with each other, was to try to not only win the game, of course that was the goal, but to win the game in such a victorious manner that you were almost hurting the other person with how wrong they were, and it just felt off to me. And so I always withdrew at the end of the night, or as it became that heated, and they knew it, they would always try to pull me back into the room or into the conversations or into the game. And I was always like, no, I'm out. I don't like when it gets like this. But I've seen it not only in their household and in their conversations when things get to a competitive level. And it doesn't always have to be a competitive level. You've seen it in your work life. You see it with your own partner and in your own home, especially, that when you say something, someone has to latch onto it. And they latch onto it in a manner that feels like criticism, like judgment, like they want to correct you. And they have the need to correct you. And that need for them to be right or correct you is actually costing the relationship, the time together, a lot, and can cost you and that everything. And you don't even realize it when it's happening or when you're doing it, when you're the person that's trying to prove, trying to convince, trying to make sure that you're right. You don't realize it's a choice. You're so caught up in proving something that you don't realize that you don't have to prove that you don't have to keep showing up in a manner that maybe makes someone smaller than you, that you don't have to step on top of someone in order to be ahead of them, right? To be bigger or taller than them. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. So it often, even in conversations, I have had littlest things that I would say in a story. I would have a neighbor over and we'd be sitting around dinner and I would tell a story about something that happened and I would say, oh my gosh, last Tuesday, you're not going to believe what happened. And inevitably, someone who was there last Tuesday would correct me and say, it wasn't last Tuesday, it was last Wednesday. It would change the whole momentum, the whole dynamics of the story. It was so deflating. And I didn't say anything at the time, but later on I would say, it doesn't matter what day of the week it was. It was about the story and not the actual day of the week that it happened. It was about what happened instead of the day. So it didn't matter whether it was a Tuesday or Wednesday to the story's impact or to the fun or to the facts that it brought. Not facts because somebody would say that they were wrong, but the impact that it brought, what day of the week it happened on. And so I would find myself in those situations. My son, I'm trying to teach him of a pattern that it's okay to not prove himself right all the time. If I say something and he'll ask me, Mom, or Mama, he calls me, what time is it? And I say it's 11 o'clock and it happens to be 11:05, that he would correct me. I tell him it doesn't matter the accuracy of that, because if he needed it to be 11:05 or exactly that time, I would have told him that. But it was just a general, oh, it's around 11 o'clock. And so those things, I have to be aware that being right isn't always the right thing to do. And sometimes when he's in a conversation or we're in conversation, he would say something, or somebody would say something in the house or in an environment, or somebody that I worked with would say something that was hurtful, that happened, that you didn't need to bring into that conversation. That wasn't really important. It wasn't a data point that shifted anything that the story had to shift, to bring. And it would just change the whole dynamics, the whole feeling of the conversation. And I would say afterwards, like, I don't understand why that was so important. And they would say, because they needed to prove themselves right, was that it was the truth. And it didn't matter if it hurt because it was truthful. And I think, wow, that is such an important thing. So listen to what that person said, that it didn't matter if it hurt because what they said was truthful. Now, I don't know. I would rather not hurt somebody. Of course, I wouldn't lie in those types of situations, but I wouldn't add something just to prove that someone was wrong, or just to prove that something was more truthful from their eyes, right? We've talked about that there are many truths to a story or to a situation. There's my truth, their truth, and probably the truth, right? We all have different perspectives of what has happened and different feelings that come into it. So yes, there are lots of truths, and they don't always have to be a participant into the story. So every single time that you try to correct somebody and try to be right, you're actually pushing the person away. You're actually changing the energy, you're changing the dynamics, and you're taking control of the conversation and of the room that isn't necessarily warranted. You don't need to control the situation or to be right at all times. And you need to really feel what that does to a relationship. Because let me tell you what winning looks like. When you're in a conversation with your partner or your coworker, and they say something to you that you know is not true, and it's something that you may disagree with, or something that misrepresents what you said or what you did, and you feel it. You feel the need to correct it. You feel righteous. You feel indignation. You feel the need to make sure that they know that they are wrong. So what do? You want to correct them, and you do correct them. You provide evidence. You remind them of what actually happened. You prove that they are wrong and that you are winning. And they have now earned and learned that when they disagree with you, that you'll attack, that they have learned that it's not maybe safe to have a different perspective from you, and that they have learned that you care more about winning and being right than you do about them and their feelings. So you're in a situation where someone has done something that bothers you, right? And they've maybe done it more than once. Maybe they put the dishes away the wrong place, or they don't put them away at all. They take them out of the dishwasher and put them on the counter. And that's something that really bothers you, and you've wanted them to change, and you've brought it up many times. So when they do it again, instead of trying to solve the problem, and instead of trying to show them or talk to them about how that just creates more work for someone else when they don't finish a task, you try to win. You try to prove that not only did they not do it right, but they failed at it, right? So you make sure that they understand exactly how wrong they were, and maybe they're trying to help you. And so it becomes a big conflict. You take away their effort in participating in a contributing manner in the relationship, in the conversation, and they do it to you as well. It can be kind of this tit for tat type thing. Like, I'm not going to let them win and I'm not going to let them win. It's like you have to have this little task on this board that you all just check off, and how many hash marks, that she won that argument. I can't let her win this one, or he did, and I can't let him win that one either. So it becomes a tally. And people tend to look at relationships or communications or arguments or situations, and they look for where they can insert their knowledge, their egos, their fear, and just their stance on things, their opinions. And sometimes, and most of the time, none of that is warranted or asked for. When you go to tell a story, something that happened in your life, you don't say, and in the middle of it, throw your opinion in. Make sure you correct me throughout the whole process. If I make a mistake, make sure you catch everything that I'm doing wrong, and you make everybody know and hear it. That's not what you want. You want to tell the story itself. You want to be leaning into the story and want people to feel what actually happened, instead of a chaotic experience of someone jumping in and changing into their point of view. So you have to be careful, and we have to be careful about what winning or convincing and proving does to a relationship, does to a conversation, does to a person. It makes them, it being the relationship, it being the conversation, feel pretty horrible. It doesn't do anything that benefits anybody but you and your ego. And that's not always welcomed. It should never be welcomed, or welcome in a point that you acknowledge it and validate it and say, that's just their limitations and I'll move on. But sometimes people can't move on from their fears and their egos, like Meg and her family, when they get to that point in conflict or in a competitive environment. I swear they would have gone to the mat to win at something, and to not only win in a victorious way, but win in a way to prove that other team, that other person was so wrong. I remember one time they were playing Trivia Pursuit, and it seemed like this question went on for hours, and it was about the Academy Award between, I think it was Pulp Fiction and maybe Forrest Gump or Shawshank Redemption in the mid 90s, and who won the Academy Award. And I think all the favorites and everybody thought it would have been Pulp Fiction. Well, it ended up that in the last minute, or as the envelope was being opened, it ended up being Forrest Gump. And that night and those evenings, and I've seen it come up in other Trivia Pursuit situations as well, that people really emphatically think that it was Pulp Fiction when really it was Forrest Gump. And they go back and forth and they play scenes and then they talk about the movies. And the whole time the game gets derailed because they want to prove that they're right and the other person is wrong. And so we have to be careful of doing that. We don't need to be right. We don't need to win at anything. I grew up in a competitive environment and played competitive sports. And believe me, I'd rather win than most anything. But I don't want to win at the expense of something else, and especially someone else and someone else's feelings. That would be just yucky to me. That would be horrible. So you don't often want to get in a situation when the argument or the situation or the conversation turns disrespectful, or that a disagreement turns into disparaging comments. Instead, you want to listen to understand and to respect. Again, you don't have to do both. They don't equal each other. You can certainly not understand someone's point of view, someone's reasoning behind something, but you can still respect their stance in it, right? Politics, religion, Trivial Pursuit, any of those things, we can certainly get to the point of respect without really needing to understand why they feel that way about a specific candidate, a specific religion, a specific movie, a specific thought. It's not our business. It's nice to support them, but we don't need to convince them that their understanding or their stance is wrong. Right. So we have to be careful of that. And so when you're trying to prove that they are wrong, you're inserting your authority. And you have to be careful, especially with kids. You have to be careful where you have authority over and with, and why do you want it? And you have to learn that it's not safe to, to disagree to the level that people do. And I don't mean that it's unsafe. I just mean safe as far as can cause damage. I don't mean the police or any of the authorities or any of those are involved. We just have to learn that, speaking up and being emphatic and trying to win at an argument means that we're losing sometimes. And most of the time, we've learned that people learn that they need, and you learn that you need to be right is more important than the need to be heard, right? So, and it's often better to be happy than right. We've heard that before, right? Happy wife, happy life. No, what that means in this conversation, but creating happiness in someone or in a situation is better to pull back than it is to just be right all the time. And so when people do things that irritate you, your partner, your child, your coworker, anybody that you come into, the grocery store clerk that irritates you, instead of letting it go, we often bring it up. And if they do something all the time, they tailgate somebody, they don't put their blinker or their directional on, or they don't, put things away in the house the way that they should or could, you just keep bringing it up, and you bring it up with the list of all the times that they did the same thing or similar things, and you build your case, you prove your point, and you win. And it may feel great. It may feel rewarding to win a conversation, to prove somebody wrong, to prove that you're right. It doesn't. It takes away so much. It takes away so much trust within the relationship. It takes away the level of safety, security, and vulnerability that someone can have with us when we constantly aren't there for them to be vulnerable and to be wrong and to be able to be okay with a conversation that the facts may not be right, that maybe it was a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday. It's okay to let all of those things go. And we don't have to keep score. We don't have to let people know that they've made mistakes. It's not right. So most of us probably have had pets in our lives, and I have a dog now, and he's a great dog, but when he does something in the house that we might not want, say he ends up just like going outside in the wind or the weather, We happen to live in an area where there is those things. So sometimes he'll poop in the house, and you cannot punish him, in my belief, if you don't see him doing it. It may have happened when he was feeling bad and he couldn't get out in time, or we didn't let him out in time in order for that to happen. So unless we actively see that dog or that situation happen and occur, and we can stop it in that moment, we can't punish somebody for something that they did 20 minutes ago, 2 years ago, 2 months ago, or 20 years ago. We just can't do that. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to us to have those conversations. It's exhausting to keep showing and proving that you're right and they're wrong. So you don't have to explain it. What's important is for you to establish that you're in things together, and not establish that you're the expert. No one wants to be around somebody who needs to be the smartest person in the room, that needs to draw the attention to them, to when they're winning and how they win. It's not fair, it's not nice, and it's not productive or healthy. So in those situations, like I did with Meg's family, love them, love the time that I had with them, have great memories, but I often withdrew, and the game kind of went, the family kind of spread out. It kind of got to a point where the two victors often would just continually argue about, the mid 90s, and it was 94 Academy Award, and why one movie won and one shouldn't have, or one person got it wrong. So you have to just be careful about what happens. So the next time that someone comes to you with an idea, a thought, a story, and that the facts or the situation might be off from what you remember, from your perception, from your memory of all those things, it's just let it go. Let the relationship, let the feelings of positive and healthy feelings stay and grow, as opposed to trying to be the victor, to try to be something where you come out ahead of someone, especially someone that you love, that you spend time with, that you care about, that you want to have a relationship with. So it's not fun to disparage people. It's not healthy to do that, even if you think it's in a funny and fun manner. It's not. And people may laugh because they don't know how to deal with it. When people are nervous or uncomfortable, laughter tends to be the emotion that they go to, or the thing that they go to. I just met a young couple over a couple of weekends ago, fairly new to dating, young, like in their 20s, both in college. And when I observed them and met with them, there was a nervous giggle the whole time. When you ask questions, nervousness, nervous giggle, awkwardness, when the age, the newness of the relationship, and the newness of my meeting them made them nervous. And so, it would not have been fair or right for me to point that out in a social setting or in any situation, to tell them what they were doing. That's their life lesson to learn. And if I have an opportunity, and they ask for my advice, I may give it to them, but not in that situation when other people are around anyway. So when everybody's in the room or anybody's around, and you see a situation where you can somebody, or you can win a disagreement, or you can maybe create some truthfulness, which you think that clarity is lacking, it's not always the best time. It's not always the best situation or the best environment to do that. It's not right to challenge someone, or challenge the situation, or change the social dynamics, because they benefit you as opposed to the whole of the group. So you have to learn that your ego needs to stay in check. And everybody feels like, oh, I don't have an ego. I'm here for the best of everybody. Everybody has an ego. You just have to acknowledge it, and resolve to the fact that it does get in the way, and it can get mucky and messy when it leads. And sometimes when ego comes out of your mouth before you're ready, it can cause harm and cause someone to get hurt. So you have to be careful of how that does come into effect. I often have conversations, we all do, we have now moved conversations to text messaging or chatting with people via our phones. And oftentimes I find myself that I catch a tone shift in writing. And you have to be careful because the written word years ago, probably, let's see, 20 years ago, 25, maybe 20, so let's just say 22 and a half years ago, I worked a job and they brought in a communication specialist. So it was when email was first coming out and being a daily occurrence. And they were teaching us kind of proper etiquette with email. And one of the things that really resonated with me so much that I remember it to this day, that it was about written words and how when you send something in writing, that your intent and how you say it, send it, write it, isn't always how it's received. So there's always that perceive versus receive. So you have to remember those things. And I'm very careful of that now. When I write things, I try to be sensitive to how someone will receive it and then how they will respond to it so that it doesn't cause conflict or harm with anybody. And another tidbit for those who don't know, and it's not important, but I'll just show it. It seems like it's the right thing. There are 3-ish words that I do not write. I do not use the word that at all. I think it just doesn't seem appropriate. Any of those things, it could be replaced. I think it's a filler word. I use the word this. If that seems to be necessary, I always change it to the word this. I don't use the word just. I try not to use it in my verbal language or verbal communication because I think it minimizes whatever we say after the word just. Oh, I'm just a housewife. I'm just a mother. I'm just an executive. I'm just this. It diminishes or minimizes the role or that word that comes after it. And the same thing with the word but. I try not to use that as well, especially in written language and written correspondence. Because what I was taught through therapy is that when you say something and then you add the word but and you continue the thought, that the word but, different from the word just, negates what comes before it. So I love you, but I'm not available for this relationship. What you're really saying is, I'm not available for this relationship. And you're trying to soften it by saying, I love you, but. And that but should never, ever, especially in emotional situations, that was probably not a good example of it, should be used in a sentence, in my opinion. You can use the word however, or and so, those types of things. So again, those are things that I just use in language, both in verbal and in written communication, where I watch, where I don't need to insert them to change the dynamic of the conversation or of the tone. So I watch them often when I receive things as well, when I receive text messages, when I hear the word that, or read, or and or hear, or the word but. I often pause and think about what that person really meant. And again, not in trying to prove them wrong or right, just in thinking about what the words mean. Because we've talked about in the past, and I'll talk about in the future as well, that words have meaning and they have intent. And whether or not our intent is to use them to diminish something or to hurt somebody, it does not. Even if the intent is to not to hurt somebody, the impact is still there. So we have to be careful of that as well. So back to the winning within our relationships and within a conversation. Again, it's not important. You have to figure out why you're trying to win, why you're trying to prove something, that you're right and that they're wrong, or that you're smarter, or that you know the facts, that your memory is better, why your perception is different from theirs, and why it needs to be brought to the table or to the conversation, why you need to say what you do, when you do, and how you do it. And when you look and think about those types of things, it comes back to you and your ego and your stance and your fear. Because again, ego, in my opinion, everything gets drawn back to 2 emotions, love and fear. So everything that comes back in ego stance, in my opinion, comes from fear. It comes from wanting to be heard, afraid not to be heard, afraid not to be seen, afraid to be abandoned, all of those things, afraid to be vulnerable. So you just have to realize that when you're trying to win at something, that you're losing. You're losing respect of others. You're losing the cadence of the conversation. You're losing the ability to have that person be vulnerable with you. And you're losing really the relationship, because when it continues, the person on the receiving end of your winning, they're losing, and they're not going to share with you the same way that they have in the past. Why would they, if they are constantly going to be disparaged or lose or feel that way? So why would they contribute in the same manner? Why would they draw you in a vulnerable way when it's not going to be met with safety or with trust? It's going to be met with some kind of comment or some kind of criticism or correction. So those conversations tend to have longer term effects. It's the same thing. What resists persist. I think I heard that on a podcast. It also comes from AA. I guess it's one of their terms. So what you resist will persist. So you have to realize why you're doing things, why you need to prove that you're right and someone else is wrong, and why you need to win. And now you have to learn how to stop that. And maybe this podcast or this topic should have been before the pause, but the pause is one way to stop it. It's one way to just insert calmness, and one way to stop your ego from feeding off of the topic and from feeding off of wanting to win. So you don't need to fill the pauses or the space. You don't need to keep the conversation going in a way that's detrimental from somebody else. You don't need to punish someone for something that they did 1 second ago, or 20 minutes ago, or 2 years ago, to prove that you're better than them, that you have more willpower or more stance or more conviction on a topic than they did at the time. It's not important. It's not important to bring those things up. And so the person that you're doing this with, maybe once or twice, become closed off. You create a distance between you, and that distance grows. And that's what winning looks like. It looks like it's costing you a lot. It's costing you that person feeling safe in conversations with you, because your ego and your need to win is pushing them away. Because every single time that you choose to win, you're choosing to push them away. You're choosing to not be close to them. You're choosing to be separate from them, better than them. You're choosing to prioritize your needs, your ego, your fear over the connection, over the conversation, over the story, over the evening. And people feel that. They don't want to be around someone who always is trying to win. They don't want to be in a relationship with someone who cares more about being right than being present. And so eventually, your winning, your ego will create so much space in relationships, in situations, that no one will want to be around you anymore. So they leave. And they don't always leave physically, but they'll leave emotionally. They'll shut down. They'll stop trying and become distant. And they become cold, not in a hurtful way, but in a protective way. And you'll wonder why your relationship feels empty, why you're not having deep conversations anymore, why everything is staying shallow, and maybe in just a little bit of judgment, or in a manner that you're spending so much time together talking about other people and other things through judgment or making fun of, or and just kind of poking fun, nicknames on things that you see, or those types of things, that it creates levity. But what it really does is create really avoidance in a deeper conversation. And so we tend to, either turn distant or cold, or we just keep things in a very shallow, very surface level topics and in conversation. And it just, after a while, there's no growth and there's no evolution. There's no really next step in any of that. It's just constantly just spending time with somebody talking about other people, how they dress, how they look, how they walk, making fun of, poking at. It's just immature. It's may seem fun and jovial at the time because it's keeping a conversation going, but you're just turning that space into making yourselves feel better again, winning over someone else. And now you're just doing it maybe in a more shallow, more judgmental, more fun way because you have these cute little terms or nicknames for people, or you can come up with quick-witted things to say about somebody and their behavior of somebody that you don't know, and yet you're judging them on something that they're doing to pass the time, to avoid deeper conversations, to avoid something that you would need to grow in. And so it's still yucky. It still feels like you're trying to win at something. And when you're winning, you're losing, right? You're losing that growth, more importantly. So we can all stay in relationships. We can all stay at jobs. We can all stay in situations and in conversations and in Trivial Pursuit games, and have a time, an engagement, a situation that may seem enjoyable, right? Even at the time, you may see, Meg's brothers go at it back and forth for 20 minutes over something, a Trivial Pursuit question and answer, but it doesn't really bring any growth. It's just one trying to win over the other, and it becomes exhausting. They talk at the topic for creates nausea, I guess it would be the word. So something you need to realize is what staying in those winning situations or in those shallow conversations where they're just surface level and they're just enough to keep the conversation going, that you're not allowing yourself or them to get close to you. And so that should create a pause. It should make you ask yourself, what do you love more? Do you love being right or being close to the person that you're trying to have a relationship with? What's more important to you? Is it more important to correct someone in a conversation about a fact, about a day of the week, or to just sit back and let the conversation flow? Is it more important to change the dynamics of a situation or a room or the energy of it than to just listen, to just evolve, to just grow, to see where things go? The things have to be so controlled. Why is it so important that we have to insert our opinions, our feelings, our perspective, our correctness into someone else's story, into someone else's day, into someone else's situation or experience? It's not healthy or productive to do that. So we have to be careful of how we contribute into a conversation where it continues to provide growth, positive energy, healthy and productive conversations and experiences. And we have to, in my opinion, create a sense of safety and self-awareness, and more importantly, self-trust in a situation, in a relationship, that people can feel heard. They can feel loved and feel seen with what they're saying, as opposed to the details that they're sharing, right? That's more important, that they're telling a story. It doesn't matter what day of the week it fell on and whether they got it wrong or right. It's more important that they're sharing something with you, and you should be engaged with that at that time. Because when you try to win an argument, you're losing at a lot more. When you try to win at proving that you're right and someone is wrong, you're losing in the long run. You're losing their respect. You're losing their sense of their safety and their vulnerability when they talk to you in the future, because they don't want to get in that situation again. They don't want to feel unseen, unsafe, unheard, and always corrected. It's a tough situation when you're in a relationship, and every time you have a conversation, you feel as though it's being received with judgment and criticism. That is so tough, whether you're a child to a parent, or a partner to a partner, or a boss to a subordinate, or subordinate to a boss. It doesn't matter the roles. It doesn't matter. You're two individuals trying to share something. It should be met with the same intent. You're trying to share to have them be a part of your life. That person doesn't have, in my opinion, the right to prove that the other person's life or experiences aren't what they really feel or see. So you can't have both. You can't choose to win all the time, to be right all the time, and be maybe happy, to be maybe growing in real moments. You can't have that authentic conversation when you're constantly feeling like you're walking on eggshells with what you can share, because it's going to be met with judgment and criticism, or you're constantly coming from a place of ego where you're looking to insert yourself and your opinions and your righteousness, your indignation. And I heard a word that really resonated with me, that people sometimes when they have an ego and they just come across pretentious. That was one of the words, but the other word was grandiose. I heard that word in an audiobook. I read about how someone comes into a room or comes into a relationship or into an environment, and they just feel pretentious and grandiose. But then when you listen to them, when you listen to the conversation, you realize all they're doing to get that grandiosity or that pretentious feeling is by talking down about somebody else, is by gossiping, is by having these conversations that seem very immature, almost like, I don't know, like childlike conversations where the maturity level, the emotional maturity level is so low that they can't really even contribute in a healthy and productive manner, because they're so consumed about somebody else that they can't work on themselves, right? If you're so focused on what other people are doing and walking and talking and wearing, then you're just so afraid to look at yourself and wonder why you have to judge them. So again, I don't want to go into that topic. I want to stay with the winning and why people do that. So something inside of you has to shift. You have to be able to relate to a person of what they bring to you and how they want to contribute to the conversation. And that's what you have to find some relationship and some relations in. You don't have to correct their stance, their conversations, their day of the week. It's not important, because what they really need is to feel heard. They need to feel like someone cares and there's someone giving them attention and understanding and respect. So you don't need to do that. You just need to stay present. You need to breathe, and you need to pause and watch your ego. Check it at the door, because it's not always, and not ever, in my opinion, necessary. Because again, when we think about ego and we look at it as fear, then it comes back to us and our own responsibility to package it up and to understand what we're afraid of. What we're afraid of if the person telling the story gets the laugh and we don't, or what we're afraid of when they tell the story and the facts aren't accurate or we remember. Why is that so important to us that we need to change the story or take the dynamics? So we don't need to drop in. We don't need to correct. We don't need to win. We don't need to do those things, because again, it doesn't do anything but make us lose. It builds resentment. It builds the situation where people roll their eyes and change their body language around us and don't want to be with us. They shift their energy and they shift where they want to spend their time, because who wants to be around somebody when every time they're around them or they're telling a story that it feels like they have to shield, they have to put their arms up because something about it is going to be corrected. The time, the day of the week, the feeling that they want to change the story, that they want it to be heard their way instead of the way that you saw it. So just be careful of that. Be careful of that you're not creating disagreements or arguments or taking away someone else's experience and feelings and them being heard just because you want to be heard. So their opinion and their experience is theirs, and you don't have any right to change it. So let them feel, let them know and be heard the way that they need to, just like you want to be. Let yourself feel what you need to. Let yourself feel the fear, understand the ego, and stop it before it does some damage, because it only will create more harm than good. And it'll be more peaceful if you can keep your own winning and ego in check. And there's no reason for you to win at any conversation. There's no reason for you to fight and to win at anything. It's more important to validate someone's feelings and validate that they're being heard and seen and felt than it is to insert that their feelings, their thoughts, and what they heard is different from yours, and that you have to prove that they're wrong. So let's just remember that, again, life and daily choices come down to two things, in my opinion: love and ego. And most of the time, 100% of the time, when you're trying to win at anything, any conversation, any relationship, you're losing. And you're losing because of your own fear, because your own ego is getting in the way. So you have a choice. You have a say. The way that you show that you are the wisest, I would say the smartest, the wisest, and most mature, emotionally mature person in the room is to not participate in a way that makes someone feel less than what they need to and less than you. That's not what they need to. They need to feel safe. They need to feel important. They need to feel validated, and they need to be heard. That's what is important. They need to feel everything they need to feel. So I hope that today resonates with you about why winning is actually losing, why winning is actually not loving, why winning isn't the positive things that you think that it does. Yes, it might give you instant gratification that, oh, I won that argument, I won my stance, I feel so much better by taking that person down, by winning that contest, by winning that game. But it's the manner and how you do it. It's the manner of how you decide to win, because winning isn't about being the smartest and the strongest and the most truthful. It's about winning at everything and every emotion, and being able to navigate not only your own but other people's as well, and letting things play along the way and not having to be right. So it's work. It is certainly work to stop yourself. It's certainly work to create those situations where you don't always win, and you don't have to win, more importantly. So it's not about a competition. It's not about winning. It's about keeping things productive and healthy and growing, more importantly. So watch for people moving away from you physically, emotionally, more importantly. Watch for conversations becoming surface level, becoming something that feels like you're outwardly judging or criticizing or doing those types of things, or laughing in situations that may not be appropriate. You wouldn't want people to do those things about you, so you shouldn't do them about others as well. So if today resonated with you, which I hope it does, and I hope they all do, I hope that you share it. Please share it so that we can change even the slightest little bit of someone's day and make it better for everyone. And hopefully it'll be contagious and move forward. So I hope that today is about us paying attention about how we participate in conversations and situations. And so share it, talk about it, change how you can participate and how others can participate in your life. Use this podcast as an example and say, hey, I heard something today that I think really resonated with me, and I'd like to share it with you. And maybe someone will hear it in a way that will change their actions, their environment, and how they participate in your world. So please also go and sign up for a discovery call with me. I'd love to work with you one-on-one. That's great as well. It's free. It's 20 to 30 minutes of your time. We get to talk a little bit about what you're going through individually, and I can help you find your own voice, find your own path and your own purpose. And I hope that's important to you as well. So again, I appreciate you showing up here today. I appreciate you did this for yourself and that you did it for me. And until next time, please keep chasing purpose.